Hello, and welcome to the Sleepy Curiosity channel. As you find a comfortable position, let your body begin to release the weight of the day. If this gentle journey is already starting to slow your thoughts, consider subscribing now, so these stories can keep finding you, night after night. Now, let the relaxation settle into your breathing. The night isn't empty. It's full of eyes you can't see, sounds you can't hear, and movements happening inches away from you without you ever noticing. For a long time, science assumed that nocturnal animals simply preferred the dark for some simple behavioral reason. As if it were a choice, a personal preference, a quirk without any deeper explanation. But the reality is far older than any choice. Most modern mammals descend from ancestors who were forced to live at night for approximately 160 million years, during the period when dinosaurs completely dominated the day. It wasn't a preference. It was survival. This period became known among scientists as the Nocturnal Bottleneck. And it left marks so deep in mammalian biology that we can still see them today in species that returned to being diurnal tens of millions of years ago. The evolutionary pressure was intense, long-lasting, and didn't fully disappear when the dinosaurs went extinct. It's a legacy that time never erased. A biological scar that we all carry, including us. There's a fundamental difference between an animal that's simply active at night and one that evolved for the night. Many animals can shift their activity schedule depending on the season or the presence of predators. But the truly nocturnal ones have adaptations built over millions of years, adaptations that make them biologically optimized for darkness in ways that go far beyond behavior. This involves their senses, physiology, metabolism, and even the structure of the brain itself. This distinction matters because it reveals that nocturnalism isn't just a habit. It's a complete evolutionary strategy, consolidated in every cell, every organ, every reflex. An animal that simply shifts its schedule for convenience is completely different from one that was sculpted by evolution over geological eras to thrive exactly when the sun disappears. And there's a detail that changes everything in this story. When the dinosaurs went extinct, around 66 million years ago, something remarkable happened to the surviving mammals. Many of them began migrating back to the day. This phenomenon was called the post-extinction diurnal invasion, and the fossil record suggests it happened relatively quickly in geological terms. But the process wasn't simple. The mammals that returned to the day had to readapt sensory systems that had already been completely rebuilt for the night. Some managed to partially recover color vision. Others were forever marked with nocturnal traits, even while living in full sunlight. Evolution, in this case, wasn't a one-way road. Reptiles were the first vertebrates to dominate terrestrial environments, and most of them were diurnal, dependent on solar heat to regulate their body temperature. When the ancestors of mammals began becoming nocturnal, one of the first problems to solve was exactly that: how to keep the body functioning without sunlight. The solution was the gradual development of homeothermy, the ability to generate internal heat. This didn't happen all at once. It was built over millions of years of selective pressure, generation after generation, in tiny invisible increments. Nocturnal life, therefore, may have been one of the main evolutionary drivers that led mammals to become warm-blooded animals. The darkness, ironically, generated heat. Among insects, the story of nocturnalism follows a different logic. Many species of moths, beetles, and crickets became nocturnal not to avoid larger predators, but to escape competition with diurnal species for the same resources, flowers, food, territory. The night functioned as an empty niche waiting to be filled. This pattern is called temporal niche partitioning, and it's one of the most elegant principles in evolutionary ecology. It shows that the diversity of life depends not only on where animals live, but also on when they live. Time, just like space, is a resource that evolution learned to divide with extraordinary precision. What almost no one realizes is that owls don't descend from a single ancestral nocturnal group. Different owl families independently evolved toward nocturnal life at distinct points in history. This means that nocturnal life was invented multiple times within birds, by lineages that had no close relationship with one another. Biologists call this convergent evolution. The same solution found through completely separate pathways, as if the night exerted such a powerful gravitational force that multiple lineages were inevitably drawn toward it over time. In the ocean, the boundary between day and night works in a completely different way from anything we know on land. Sunlight only penetrates to about 200 meters deep. Below that, there's a permanent darkness that doesn't change with sunrise or sunset. The animals living at those depths aren't nocturnal in the traditional sense. They simply never knew light. But there's a fascinating phenomenon in the intermediate layers of the ocean: daily vertical migration. Millions of creatures rise to the surface during the night to feed and descend back into the depths during the day to hide from predators. It's the largest animal migration on the planet, happening silently, every night, in the world's oceans, without most people even knowing it exists. Not all nocturnal animals arrived at darkness through the same evolutionary route. Some became nocturnal to avoid predators. Others, to escape the extreme heat of desert environments. Still others, to exploit food resources available only at night, like certain fruits, nectar, or specific prey. This diversity of origins produced an equivalent diversity of solutions. A desert gecko that's nocturnal to escape the heat will have completely different biological adaptations than a bat that's nocturnal to avoid competition with birds. The destination was the same: the night. But the paths were entirely different. There's an intriguing hypothesis in evolutionary biology called the nocturnal pioneer advantage. It suggests that during periods of intense environmental pressure, such as mass extinctions or severe climate change, animals with the ability to adapt to nocturnal life have a significant survival advantage. The reason is that the night offers protection, less competition, and access to different resources. Fossil data suggests that after major extinctions, the diversity of nocturnal animals increased more rapidly than that of diurnal ones. Darkness, at certain moments in Earth's history, was literally an evolutionary refuge. A place where life was preserved while everything else disappeared. This starts to get more interesting when we look at molecular genetics. When comparing the genes responsible for color vision in different mammal species, scientists found something revealing. Most mammals have far fewer types of color photoreceptors than fish, reptiles, and birds. The most widely accepted explanation is that during the long nocturnal period forced by the dinosaurs, the genes responsible for detecting certain colors were gradually lost through disuse. Rich color vision simply had no value in the dark. It's a powerful example of how evolution doesn't only add. It also removes what doesn't serve, with the same silent efficiency with which it builds what's needed. Human night vision is quite limited, and because of that we tend to imagine that nocturnal animals simply see better than we do. But the difference goes far beyond the amount of light captured. It involves a completely different ocular architecture, built over millions of years of evolutionary pressure. The eye of a typical nocturnal animal solves the problem of darkness in several ways at once. The pupils can dilate to an extreme degree to capture as much available light as possible. The ratio between the cornea and the total size of the eye is much greater than in diurnal animals. And the density of photoreceptor cells sensitive to dim light is dramatically higher. It's not just an improved eye. It's a different instrument, built for different purposes. Behind the retina of many nocturnal animals there's a structure that doesn't exist in human eyes, the tapetum lucidum. This is a layer of cells with reflective properties that functions like an internal mirror. It reflects light that has already passed through the retina back toward the photoreceptors, giving the eye a second chance to capture the light signal. It's exactly this structure that makes the eyes of cats and dogs glow when illuminated at night. The glow isn't generated by the eyes. It's light being sent back out after internal reflection. The tapetum lucidum can increase visual sensitivity in dark environments by up to 40%, depending on the species. An elegant solution to a problem that seems to have no easy answer. And there's a detail that changes everything when we talk about owls. Their eyes are so large relative to their skull that they are practically immobile within their sockets. An owl can't move its eyes sideways. It has to turn its entire head to shift its field of vision. To compensate, evolution developed an extraordinary cervical ability. Owls can rotate their neck up to 270 degrees in each direction. This is possible thanks to a special vascular system that prevents the interruption of blood flow during extreme rotation, a problem that would be fatal in any other vertebrate. The limitation of one system generated the sophistication of another, as happened so many times in evolution. Echolocation, the ability to see through sound, is often associated only with bats. But it emerged independently in at least four distinct animal groups: bats, dolphins, shrews, and certain cave-dwelling birds. Each group developed its own version of the system, with different frequencies, mechanisms, and levels of precision. In bats, the system reached an impressive degree of refinement. Some species emit ultrasonic pulses above 100 kHz, far beyond anything a human can hear, and process the returning echo in milliseconds, building a three-dimensional map of the environment in real time. The brains of these animals dedicate an enormous proportion of their processing solely to interpreting sounds. For them, sound is image. The entire night is a landscape built from echoes. What seems simple isn't. One of the challenges of echolocation is that the animal needs to emit extremely loud sounds while simultaneously hearing very faint echoes. In theory, the call itself should deafen the animal before any echo could return. Bats solved this problem with a remarkable physiological mechanism. A small muscle in the middle ear contracts at exactly the moment the sound is emitted, temporarily reducing the animal's own auditory sensitivity. This synchronization happens in fractions of a millisecond, with a precision that defies intuitive understanding. The muscle relaxes immediately after the emission, restoring auditory sensitivity just in time to capture the echo. It's a system of protection and perception functioning simultaneously, coordinated by the nervous system in real time. Smell is, for many nocturnal animals, the most important sense. And it works in ways that go far beyond what we imagine. Rats, opossums, and many nocturnal carnivores possess a second completely separate olfactory system, called the vomeronasal organ, located in the roof of the mouth. While conventional smell detects volatile molecules in the air, the vomeronasal organ is specialized in capturing pheromones and other chemical communication molecules. It connects directly to regions of the brain linked to social and reproductive behavior, without going through conscious processing. In many nocturnal animals, this system is so developed that it allows them to identify the reproductive state, stress level, and even the individual identity of another animal simply by smell, without needing to see it, hear it, or touch it. Some nocturnal snakes possess a sense that has no equivalent in mammals: the detection of infrared radiation. The L'Oreal pits, small depressions on the heads of snakes like boars, pythons, and rattlesnakes, contain ultra-thin membranes capable of detecting temperature differences of as little as 0.003 of a degree Celsius. This means these snakes can see the heat emitted by warm-blooded animals in complete darkness, even without any available light. The brain integrates this information with conventional vision to create a composite image of the environment, a form of perception that combines two distinct spectrums of physical reality. It's a sense that has no name in human experience. Sharks and some other nocturnal marine species possess a sensory system called the lateral line, a series of canals and pores that run along the body and detect minimal variations in pressure and movement in the water. At night, when vision is limited even for animals with adapted eyes, this system becomes the primary guide for navigation and hunting. In addition to the lateral line, many sharks possess the ampullae of Lorenzini, electroreceptive organs capable of detecting the electrical fields generated by the muscles and nerves of other animals. A fish buried under the sand, completely invisible, emits an electric field faint enough to be detected at close range. For a shark at night, darkness is simply a matter of perspective. Touch, in many nocturnal animals, operates at a scale of sensitivity that's difficult to imagine. The whiskers of cats, rats, and otters aren't just ordinary hairs. Each vibrissae is connected to a dense concentration of nerve endings at its base, and the brain dedicates specific and proportionally large areas to processing the information they send. In rats, there's a region of the cerebral cortex called the barrel cortex, literally a neurological map where each cluster of cells corresponds to a specific whisker. When a rat explores an environment in the dark, its whiskers vibrate up to 25 times per second, sending the brain a continuous stream of information about texture, shape, and distance. The rat doesn't feel its way through space. It reads it. Magnetoception, the ability to detect Earth's magnetic field, remained obscure to science for a long time. Recent studies have confirmed that animals like pigeons, sea turtles, and certain bat species possess biological structures sensitive to magnetism, likely composed of particles of magnetite, an iron-based mineral found in nerve tissue. For animals that travel long distances at night, without clear visual reference points, this sense can function like an internal compass. What still puzzles researchers is the exact mechanism. It's still not completely clear how the magnetic field is translated into usable neural information. It's one of the last great mysteries of sensory biology, and the more scientists investigate, the deeper the mystery seems to become. The hearing of nocturnal animals frequently operates at frequencies completely outside the human range. Elephants, for example, communicate partially through infrasound, vibrations below 20 Hz that humans can't hear, but that can travel several kilometers through the ground. African elephants use this ability especially at night, when the environment is quieter and sound propagation is more efficient. Part of this communication is received not by the ear, but by the feet. The ground vibrations are captured by specialized receptors in the soles and transmitted to the nervous system through the bones. In elephants, hearing and feeling the ground are, in certain contexts, the same thing. This shouldn't happen, but it does. Some species of nocturnal frogs and toads developed an auditory system with a remarkable quirk: they hear partially through their lungs. The lung wall vibrates in response to certain sound frequencies and transmits that vibration to the inner ear through body tissue. This allows these species to detect sounds at low frequencies with a sensitivity that the outer ear alone couldn't achieve. This discovery surprised biologists because it implies that the respiratory system and the auditory system, in some species, share function. Evolution doesn't work with separate compartments. It adapts what exists, combining systems in ways no human engineer would think to combine. And this is where things get strange. Certain species of nocturnal spiders can detect ultraviolet light. Some snakes perceive infrared. And scorpions, under ultraviolet light, scorpions fluoresce intensely, and there's evidence that they themselves can detect that fluorescence. This suggests that scorpions may use their own glow as an ambient light sensor. When the fluorescence is intense, there's enough ultraviolet light to make the animal visible to predators, signaling that it's safer to stay hidden. The animal uses its own body as a measuring instrument of environmental risk. A form of perception that has no equivalent in any experience humans know. The brain's processing of sensory information in nocturnal animals is, in many cases, structurally different from that of diurnal animals, not just in size, but in organization. In bats, the brain regions dedicated to auditory processing are proportionally much larger than in diurnal mammals of equivalent size, while the visual areas are reduced. This reflects a fundamental principle of neuroscience: the brain allocates resources to what it uses most. Evolution shapes not only the sense organs, but the entire neural architecture that supports them. A bat and a squirrel of the same size have brains that, internally, seem built for completely different worlds. Because they are. Every living organism has some form of internal biological clock, a molecular mechanism that measures time based on repetitive biochemical cycles. In nocturnal animals, this clock doesn't work in the opposite way from that of diurnal animals. It works in sync with the same cycles of light and darkness, but with inverted phases. What determines whether an animal is nocturnal or diurnal isn't the absence of a biological clock, but the moment in the cycle when that clock triggers peaks of activity, alertness, and sleep. Small molecular differences in the genes that regulate this cycle can determine whether an animal wakes with sunrise or with sunset. Time, in biology, is a question of phase, not of absence. Melatonin is often called the sleep hormone, but that description is incomplete. In nocturnal animals, melatonin has the same molecular function. It's produced in response to darkness, but its behavioral effect is the opposite. Instead of inducing sleep, it signals the beginning of the active period. This reveals that melatonin isn't a sleep hormone per se, but a darkness hormone. A chemical signal that tells the body that the light has dimmed. What the body does with that information depends on how it was programmed evolutionarily. For a human, darkness means sleep. For a bat, it means waking up and hunting. The same signal. Opposite worlds. The body temperature of nocturnal mammals follows patterns distinct from diurnal ones. In many nocturnal animals, body temperature drops slightly during the day, the rest period, and rises during the night, when activity increases. In some species, this daily thermal variation is surprisingly wide. Certain bats can let their body temperature drop to near ambient temperature during their daytime rest, a form of light torpor that saves significant energy. When night comes, the metabolism accelerates, the temperature rises, and the animal is ready to fly within minutes. The entire body prepares for the darkness the way it would prepare to wake from a very deep sleep. The liver of nocturnal animals has its own peripheral clock, a molecular system that coordinates metabolism with feeding times. Experiments with rats, which are naturally nocturnal, showed that forcing them to eat only during the day slows their metabolism, increases fat accumulation, and disrupts metabolic hormones, even when the caloric intake is identical. The timing of feeding, regardless of what's eaten, profoundly affects how the body processes energy. Metabolism isn't just the what. It's also the when. And for a nocturnal animal forced to eat at the wrong time, the entire body protests in silence. There's an important physiological distinction between strictly nocturnal animals and crepuscular animals, those active mainly at dawn and dusk. Crepuscular animals inhabit a luminous transition zone where the light is sufficient to partially activate vision, but still dim enough to reduce visibility for diurnal predators. Many deer and elk are crepuscular for exactly this reason. Their visual system is optimized for the specific conditions of twilight, not for total darkness, nor for the full light of midday. It's a refined temporal strategy that exploits a window of time where conditions are simultaneously favorable for feeding and relatively safe in terms of predation. A precious interval between two worlds. The sleep of nocturnal animals raises a question that seems simple, but has deep implications. If an animal is active at night and sleeps during the day, is its sleep physiologically identical to the nighttime sleep of diurnal animals? The answer, discovered over decades of comparative neuroscience research, is that sleep itself, its phases, functions, and brain architecture, is remarkably conserved across species, regardless of when it occurs. Nocturnal rats show the same sleep phases as diurnal humans, with equivalent functions of memory consolidation, cellular restoration, and hormonal regulation. What changes is the timing, not the structure. This suggests that sleep is a biological need so fundamental that evolution preserved it intact even when it completely reversed an animal's activity cycle. And there's a detail that changes everything in this observation. Sleep deprivation in nocturnal animals produces the same devastating effects as in diurnal ones: cognitive decline, immune suppression, metabolic dysregulation, and in extreme cases, death. The clock can be reversed, but the need for rest remains absolute. The night may be the time to wake, but the dream is still necessary, still sacred, still the moment when body and mind rebuild themselves in silence. The pupil of a nocturnal animal isn't just an opening that dilates. It's a structure with a specific geometry that determines how and how much light enters the eye. Cats have vertical slit pupils that allow an extreme range between maximum contraction and maximum dilation, far greater than the human circular pupil can achieve. Optical modeling studies showed that vertical slit pupils, combined with eyes positioned close to ground level, create a specific advantage for ambush predators. They improve horizontal distance estimation, exactly what a cat needs to calculate the moment of a pounce on prey. The geometry of the pupil isn't arbitrary. It's shaped by the characteristic hunting behavior of each species, as if the shape of the eye told the story of how the animal survives. Octopuses and squids have W-shaped pupils that distribute light in a way that reduces chromatic aberration, an optical problem caused by the fact that different wavelengths of light focus at slightly different points. This solution, found in marine invertebrates, rivals modern optical technologies in its functional elegance. And it was developed not by engineers with decades of experience, but by the silent pressure of surviving in the dark, generation after generation, over hundreds of millions of years. The skin of many nocturnal animals performs sensory functions that go far beyond physical protection. In bats, the wing membrane is filled with receptors sensitive to temperature, pressure, and deformation. As they fly in the dark, bats constantly receive information about air conditions through this membrane, turbulence, pressure variations, changes in wind speed. This sensitivity is so refined that bats can detect minimal variations in airflow around their wings and instantly adjust the position of the membranes to optimize flight. It's a real-time aerodynamic control system, mediated by the skin. A bat's wing isn't just a flight organ. It's also a sophisticated sensory organ that reads the air as it moves through it. In nocturnal snakes, the skin also detects substrate vibrations with great sensitivity, allowing the animal to perceive the movements of prey or predators transmitted through the ground before any visual or olfactory contact. For these serpents, the ground speaks constantly. Every distant movement, every step of prey meters away, arrives as a gentle vibration through the scales. The entire body is an ear. The heart of a bat is an extraordinary organ. During active flight, the heart rate can exceed 1,000 beats per minute, one of the highest ever recorded in mammals. During daytime torpor, that same heart rate can drop to fewer than 20 beats per minute. This variation of more than 50 times within a 24-hour period demands an extraordinarily flexible cardiovascular system. A bat's heart is proportionally large relative to its body, about 2 to 3 times larger than would be expected for a mammal of equivalent size, and its cardiac muscle possesses special contractile properties that allow this extreme range without tissue damage. Medicine still studies these mechanisms with interest, because the processes that protect the bat's heart during these extreme cycles may have implications for our understanding of human cardiovascular disease. The immune system of nocturnal animals also follows circadian rhythms with significant practical consequences. In nocturnal mammals, immune cell activity is highest during the daytime rest period, when the body directs energy toward maintenance and repair. During the active nocturnal phase, metabolic resources are prioritized for movement, hunting, and reproduction. This rhythmic allocation means that vulnerability to infections can vary throughout the day, and that pathogens that replicate more rapidly at certain moments in the host's circadian cycle may have an evolutionary advantage. The battle between the immune system and a pathogen has a temporal dimension that's rarely considered. Time, once again, as a battlefield. What almost no one realizes is that bats are natural reservoirs for an extraordinarily high number of viruses, including coronaviruses and others highly pathogenic to mammals, without developing the severe diseases these pathogens cause in other species. Recent research suggests that the bat immune system evolved to tolerate these viruses rather than eliminate them, possibly as a consequence of the extreme physiological demands of nocturnal flight. Living alongside danger, over millions of years, produced a form of biological peace that no immunologist fully understands yet. Night vision doesn't depend only on the number of photoreceptors. It also depends on how quickly they recover after being stimulated by light. This process, called dark adaptation, involves the regeneration of a molecule called rhodopsin. In humans, complete dark adaptation takes about 30 minutes. In some nocturnal animal species, this process is significantly faster. Animals that need to move quickly between environments of varying luminosity have more efficient enzymatic regeneration systems, allowing almost immediate readaptation. The eye recalibrates so quickly that the transition between light and darkness is nearly imperceptible to the animal. Animals that enter hibernation frequently synchronize the onset of this state with seasonal circadian signals. During hibernation, the metabolism can drop to less than 5% of its normal level. Body temperature can approach 0 degrees in some cases, and the heartbeat can fall to just 1 or 2 beats per minute. What's remarkable is that even in this state of apparent biological suspension, the circadian clock keeps running. Experiments with hibernating animals in chambers of constant temperature and no light showed that they still display waking cycles aligned with periods of approximately 24 hours, even without any external time cues. The internal clock survives hibernation with surprising fidelity. Time keeps being measured even when the body has nearly stopped. The brains of nocturnal animals don't just process information differently. They also consolidate memory in ways adapted to the nocturnal learning cycle. In rats, Spatial memory consolidation occurs preferentially during the daytime sleep that follows nocturnal exploration. During this sleep, the hippocampus replays patterns of neural activity generated during nighttime exploration, transferring information to long-term storage. This process happens at an accelerated rate. What took minutes of exploration can be replayed in seconds during sleep. The night is the time to experience. The day, to consolidate what was experienced. And this mechanism identified in rats helped explain why sleep is essential for memory in virtually all mammals, including us. Nocturnal feeding imposes specific digestive demands that shape the physiology of many animals. Nocturnal snakes frequently capture prey large relative to their own size and need to digest it during their daytime rest. In some python species, oxygen consumption can increase up to 40 times in the hours following the ingestion of prey. Pythons that have just fed frequently seek heated surfaces during the day, not just for general thermoregulation, but specifically to optimize the digestion of their nocturnal meal. The intestine of a python that hasn't eaten for weeks is significantly smaller and less vascularized than after a meal. The organ literally grows in response to feeding and regresses during fasting. A form of energy economy that has no equivalent in mammals. Communication among nocturnal animals faces a fundamental challenge. The visual signals that dominate communication in many diurnal species are of limited use in darkness. The evolutionary solution was to diversify communication channels in ways that take advantage of exactly the conditions of the night. Crickets produce calls that carry information about the male's body size, health, and genetic condition. Females can discriminate between candidates based on subtle differences in the frequency and rhythm of the call, even at a distance of several meters in complete darkness. Each cricket species has a specific acoustic signature that prevents crossbreeding with related species. It's a mechanism of reproductive isolation mediated entirely by nocturnal sound. Frogs and toads take this complexity even further. In environments where multiple species call simultaneously, which is common in tropical forests at night, each species occupies a slightly different frequency band, like radio stations on distinct frequencies. This phenomenon, called acoustic partitioning, evolved to reduce interference between species and ensure that signals reach the correct receivers even in a dense and competitive sound environment. The nighttime forest isn't a cacophony. It's an extraordinarily organized conversation, where each voice found its own space over millions of years. Territorial marking through scent is especially efficient for nocturnal animals, because chemical marks persist in the environment long after the animal that left them has departed. Many nocturnal mammals use specialized glands to deposit secretions on surfaces in the environment, conveying information that other members of the species can read hours or even days later. Studies revealed that these secretions contain dozens of organic compounds in proportion specific to each individual, like a chemical fingerprint. The composition changes with reproductive state, age, and possibly the animal's health condition. Other animals of the same species can extract this information with a single sniff. Nocturnal chemical communication is, in certain respects, richer in information than any equivalent visual signal. The reproduction of many nocturnal animals is synchronized not only with the seasons, but with specific phases of the lunar cycle. Studies with wild rodents showed that nocturnal activity decreases significantly on full moon nights, when natural illumination is greater and vulnerability to predation increases. This behavior has been recorded in dozens of species and represents a form of continuous environmental risk assessment mediated by light perception. The deeper implication is that the moon isn't just an astronomical object for these animals. It's an active environmental variable that shapes everyday behavioral decisions. The lunar rhythm is embedded in the biology of many nocturnal species in ways that haven't yet been fully mapped. Nocturnal migration is a far more common phenomenon than most people imagine. It's estimated that between 60 and 80% of migratory species in the Northern Hemisphere make their long-distance movements predominantly at night. The nighttime air is generally cooler and denser, making flight easier. Aerial predators are less active, and the stars offer a reliable navigation system that works independently of terrestrial reference points. The ability to navigate by the stars has been demonstrated experimentally in various bird species. When the star map was artificially rotated in planetariums, the birds adjusted their flight direction accordingly. This ability isn't completely innate. There's a critical period during the chick's development when the animal learns to identify the rotation point of the night sky, the point that indicates north. In addition to the stars, many nocturnal migratory birds combine multiple navigation systems simultaneously: Earth's magnetic field, infrasound generated by wind over mountain ranges, and possibly even smell to identify specific geographic regions. Long-distance nocturnal navigation is, in terms of computational complexity, one of the most sophisticated behaviors ever studied in animal biology. A bird the size of a sparrow, flying alone in the dark at kilometers of altitude, crossing entire oceans, knowing exactly where to go. There's something deeply mysterious about that precision. Learning by observation occurs in nocturnal species in ways that reveal specific adaptations for low-light environments. In bats, the cultural transmission of foraging routes was documented in a surprising way. Young bats that associate with experienced adults during nocturnal flights learn specific routes to seasonal food sources that they couldn't find on their own. This transmission of geographic knowledge between generations constitutes a rudimentary form of culture. Socially acquired information that shapes the behavior of individuals who would never have discovered that information independently. In nocturnal migratory species, specific migration routes are passed from parents to offspring across generations. When populations are decimated and reintroduced without experienced individuals, they frequently lose these routes permanently. The accumulated nocturnal knowledge has a survival value that can't easily be recovered by biology alone. The relationship between nocturnal predators and prey produce some of the most elaborate evolutionary arms races ever documented. Moths, which are the primary nocturnal prey of bats in many ecosystems, developed over tens of millions of years a series of defenses against echolocation. Some species have specialized hairs that absorb bat ultrasound instead of reflecting it, making the animal less detectable. Others developed ears capable of detecting bat ultrasonic pulses at distances of up to 40 meters. By detecting the predator early, the moth can initiate evasive maneuvers before being located. And most surprisingly, some species emit ultrasonic clicks that interfere with bat echolocation, disrupting the return signal. This biological electronic warfare strategy emerged independently in at least 4 different moth families. The selective pressure was intense enough to generate the same solution multiple times, in unrelated lineages. Nocturnal territoriality operates according to different principles than diurnal territoriality. For many nocturnal animals, territory isn't a space defended by visible physical presence. It's a space defended by overlapping layers of chemical, acoustic, and behavioral signals that communicate occupancy even in the owner's absence. Leopards scratch vertical surfaces at strategic points in their territory, and these marks carry both visual and olfactory information. The height of the marks communicates the animal's size. The frequency of renewal communicates the level of recent activity. And tracking studies showed that leopards with overlapping territories frequently adjust their activity schedules to avoid encounters, a system of temporal space partitioning that reduces the cost of conflict without eliminating exclusive use. Nocturnal parental care in mammals presents unique challenges. Female bats that form maternity colonies developed a remarkable ability to individually recognize offspring among tens of thousands of other individuals. When a female returns from a night of foraging to a cave with a maternity colony, she uses a combination of the pup's specific vocalization, individual scent, and spatial position within the cave to identify her offspring with an accuracy exceeding 95%, even in colonies of millions of individuals. The bond between mother and child crosses the darkness, the noise, the crowd. Ambush predation is an especially efficient strategy for nocturnal animals, because darkness reduces the prey's ability to detect a motionless predator. The gaboon viper of sub-Saharan Africa can remain completely still in a single location for days or even weeks, waiting for prey to pass within striking range. Telemetry studies showed that they carefully select ambush sites based on olfactory cues from prey trails, positioning themselves at frequent passage points where the probability of an encounter is maximized. The attack can be completed in less than a quarter of a second, faster than the human nervous system can initiate a conscious response. The combination of indefinite waiting with instantaneous attack is possible because the snake's neuromuscular system maintains a state of pre-activation throughout the entire ambush. Strategic silence is a dimension of nocturnal behavior that's frequently underestimated. Owls are the most studied example. The wing feathers of owls have serrated edges at the front and a velvety texture on the upper surface that suppresses the air turbulences that normally generate the sound of wing beats in birds. Comparative acoustic measurement showed that an owl's flight is virtually inaudible to human ears at distances greater than 1 meter. The engineering of owl feathers was so efficient that it inspired research in aeronautical engineering for the development of quieter wind turbines. The solution to a billion-dollar problem found in the feathers of a bird that has hunted in the dark for millions of years. Nocturnal navigation in three-dimensional environments, like dense forests, caves, or buildings, imposes cognitive demands that few animals can meet efficiently. Bats that inhabit caves build three-dimensional cognitive maps of their shelters that allow high-speed navigation in absolute darkness, in environments with complex geometry, and among thousands of other individuals flying simultaneously. Experiments in which elements of the cave environment were altered showed that bats detect the changes quickly and update their internal maps. In well-known caves, detection of changes is nearly immediate. Familiarity with a nocturnal place creates a precision that defies imagination. The stress response in nocturnal animals when exposed to artificial light reveals how light is a fundamental physiological regulator that goes far beyond vision. Rats exposed to artificial light at night, even at very low intensities, show elevated cortisol levels, suppression of melatonin production, sleep fragmentation, and in the long term, increased risk of obesity, diabetes, and tumors, all of this without any change in diet or exercise. The central mechanism involves cells in the retina that contain a pigment called melanopsin, particularly sensitive to blue light, the wavelength predominant in electronic screens and modern LED lighting. For wild nocturnal animals in urban environments, light pollution represents a constant physiological disruption. Artificial nighttime lighting may be one of the most pervasive and least recognized forms of ecosystem disruption on the planet. Bioluminescence is far more widespread than most people imagine. It's estimated that more than 76% of all marine species at depths below 200 meters are bioluminescent to some degree, making the production of biological light the most common form of visual communication on the planet in absolute terms of species involved. Bioluminescence emerged independently at least 40 to 50 times throughout evolution. It's one of the most dramatic examples of convergent evolution ever documented. Different animals, in different oceans, in different geological eras, all arriving at the same solution, making light in the dark. In the terrestrial environment, fireflies are the most familiar example, but the sophistication of their system goes far beyond simple glowing. Each species has a specific flash pattern, a combination of duration, interval, a number of pulses that functions as a recognition signature between males and females of the same species. Females of some species learn to mimic the flash patterns of other species to attract males of those species and consume them. A predatory use of the same system that evolved for reproduction. Light as a trap. The trust embedded in the luminous signal being exploited by evolution in ways that, if they were human, we'd call deception. Unihemispheric sleep, the ability to keep half the brain awake while the other half sleeps, is one of the most extraordinary phenomena in animal neuroscience. Dolphins and whales use this system continuously. One cerebral hemisphere sleeps while the other maintains control of breathing behavior and basic vigilance. The eye connected to the awake hemisphere remains open, monitoring the environment. The hemispheres alternate roles in cycles of a few hours. In nocturnal migratory birds, unihemispheric sleep was documented during flight. Studies with frigate birds showed that they sleep an average of 41 minutes per day during flights of up to 10 days of continuous duration, divided into episodes of just a few seconds each. The body finds ways to rest even when it can't stop. Polarized vision, the ability to detect the orientation of the vibration plane of light waves, is present in many nocturnal invertebrates and has no equivalent in human perception. African dung beetles were the first group of insects documented to navigate using the Milky Way. In experiments conducted in a planetarium, the beetles maintained straight trajectories when the ceiling showed a normal starry sky, but lost their orientation when only the Milky Way was concealed. It's specifically the galactic band of light, and not individual stars, that serves as a navigation reference. A beetle rolling a ball of dung in a straight line in the dark, guided by the light of billions of stars light-years away. There's something deeply poetic about that image. The echolocation of horseshoe bats reached a level of refinement that challenges the theoretical physical limits of acoustic perception. They emit long pulses of stable frequency and detect the Doppler shift in the returning echo caused by the relative motion between the bat and the detected object. This is the same phenomenon that makes an ambulance siren sound higher pitched as it approaches and lower pitched as it moves away. Horseshoe bats can detect Doppler shift variations of less than 0.1%, which allows them to determine not just the position of an insect, but the speed and direction of its wing movements, distinguishing flying insects from leaves swaying in the wind with a precision that surpasses any artificial sonar system of equivalent size. Magnetoception in nocturnal animals operates through molecular mechanisms that sit at the boundary between biology and quantum physics. One of the best supported hypotheses involves proteins called cryptochromes, present in the retina of many migratory birds, which can form free radical pairs with quantum states that are altered by the magnetic field. If this hypothesis is correct, nocturnal migratory birds would literally be seeing Earth's magnetic field as a visual overlay over their normal vision. The magnetic compass would be an additional dimension of vision itself. The implication is that the visual perception of nocturnal migratory birds may include information that has no equivalent in any known human sensory experience. Ultrasonic communication among nocturnal mammals goes beyond echolocation and includes elaborate social vocalization systems that operate at frequencies invisible to the human ear. Rats emit complex ultrasonic vocalizations in contexts of play, stress, mating, and filial interaction. Spectrographic analyses of rat vocalizations in play situations revealed patterns that structurally resemble the joy calls in humans, including frequency modulations that researchers describe as analogous to laughter. When rats are tickled by humans who learn to imitate the touch patterns they use with each other during play, they emit these high-frequency calls and actively seek contact with the researcher's hand. The emotional night of mammals shares deep evolutionary roots. Play behavior in young nocturnal animals occurs in specific forms adapted to dark environments. Young bats perform nocturnal practice flights that combine echolocation training with social exploration of the environment. Young raccoons develop their manipulative skills through intensive tactile exploration during the first weeks of life. And lion cubs practice nocturnal games of pursuit and ambush that specifically train the skills of silent movement, distance assessment in low light, and coordination between group members. Long-term observation showed that cubs that participate more actively in these nocturnal games tend to become more efficient hunters in adulthood. Nocturnal play has a direct and measurable survival value. It's not just fun. It's a rehearsal for life. The night isn't just the backdrop where nocturnal animals live. It's a complete functional ecosystem, with its own food chains, energy flows, and population dynamics that operate in parallel to the diurnal ecosystem. The understanding that day and night constitute temporally separate but deeply interdependent ecosystems is one of the most important contributions of nocturnal ecology in recent decades. Removing nocturnal animals from an ecosystem doesn't just impoverish the night. It destabilizes the day. The two worlds are connected in ways we're only now beginning to understand. Nocturnal pollination is an ecosystem service of global importance that receives a tiny fraction of the attention devoted to daytime pollination by bees. It's estimated that between 20 and 30% of all flowering plant species depend entirely or partially on nocturnal pollinators for their reproduction. Flowers pollinated at night converge evolutionarily toward specific characteristics, white or pale coloring to maximize visibility in low light, floral opening synchronized with nightfall, and concentrated nectar and fragrance production during the nighttime hours. The fragrance of nocturnal flowers disperses for dozens of meters in the calmer, more humid nighttime air. The chemistry of these fragrances is specific to the olfactory receptors of the target pollinators. Compounds that are attractive to moths may be neutral or repulsive to bats. The coevolution between plant and nocturnal pollinator produced chemical communication systems of extraordinary precision. Insectivorous bats provide a biological pest control service whose economic value has been calculated at tens of billions of dollars annually in North American agriculture alone. A single bat colony can consume dozens of tons of insects per night, including agricultural pests. Bats preferentially hunt insects in flight, and many of the most destructive agricultural pests spend part of their life cycle as adult moths that disperse by flying at night to lay eggs on new crops. By preying on these adults before they deposit eggs, bats interrupt the reproductive cycle of pests at a point of high vulnerability. The presence of bats in an agricultural landscape measurably reduces the need for pesticides. The loss of bats is also the loss of a pest control system that took tens of millions of years to develop and that no current human technology can replicate. Nocturnal seed dispersal by frugivorous bats is a critical component of forest regeneration. A frugivorous bat can fly dozens of kilometers in a single night, depositing seeds in locations far from the parent plant. This long-distance dispersal is essential for genetic connectivity between plant populations in fragmented landscapes. Tracking studies in fragmented tropical forests showed that bats are responsible for a significantly larger proportion of seed dispersal between fragments than any other vertebrate group. In landscapes where deforestation created extensive open areas, bats are frequently the only vector capable of transporting seeds across these barriers. They are, literally, the engineers of nocturnal forest reconnect. Nocturnal food chains in freshwater aquatic ecosystems are structured in a fundamentally different way from diurnal ones, because the vertical distribution of organisms in lakes and rivers changes dramatically between day and night. During the day, many aquatic invertebrates concentrate in deeper, darker zones to avoid visual predators. At night, these organisms migrate to the surface to feed. Nocturnal fish synchronize their hunting activity with these migrations, taking advantage of the concentration of prey in shallow zones during the first hours of night. Acoustic tracking studies showed that catfish begin their movement toward shallow zones 20 to 30 minutes before nightfall, anticipating the migration of prey before it occurs. They don't react to the presence of prey. They predict where the prey will be. The role of nocturnal animals in nutrient cycling is substantial and frequently invisible in conventional ecosystem analyses. Bats that feed in open areas and defecate in caves or forest shelters transfer nutrients between ecosystems in quantities that can have measurable impacts on local soil fertility. The bat guano accumulated in caves over centuries sustains entire underground ecosystems of organisms that depend on this input of external nutrients. Some of these cave communities are highly specialized and endemic, found only in specific caves with certain bat species. The local extinction of a bat colony is equivalent to the destruction of an ecosystem entirely dependent on it. Light pollution currently represents one of the fastest-growing ecological threats to nocturnal animals on a global scale. Its effects are sufficiently widespread that some ecologists describe it as a form of temporal habitat destruction. It doesn't destroy the physical space where animals live, but it destroys the darkness conditions that make that space habitable for nocturnal species. Female sea turtles are disoriented by coastal artificial lighting and frequently return to the sea without nesting. Newly hatched hatchlings, which naturally orient toward the reflection of moonlight on the ocean surface, are attracted by terrestrial lights and die dehydrated in parking lots and roads. Artificial nighttime lighting may be one of the most pervasive and least recognized disruptions of ecosystems on the planet. Coral reef ecosystems have a nocturnal dimension that is almost completely different from their daytime appearance. Species that are invisible during the day emerge at night and dominate the space, while the most conspicuous daytime species retreat to their shelters. Hard corals, which during the day look like inert mineral structures, extend their polyps at night for active feeding, capturing zooplankton that rises to the surface during darkness. The nocturnal feeding of coral polyps is a critical component of the reef's energy balance, complementing the energy obtained through photosynthesis during the day. Reefs that experience artificially illuminated nights show reductions in polyp feeding rates and changes in zooplankton composition. Subtle disruptions with long-term consequences for the health of one of the most biodiverse ecosystems on the planet. Competition among nocturnal predators for the same space and prey produce systems of temporal niche partitioning of great sophistication. In sub-Saharan Africa, lions, leopards, cheetahs, wild dogs, and hyenas coexist in many savannas by exploiting a combination of different prey, different activity schedules, and different hunting strategies. Lions are most active in the early hours of the morning. Leopards dominate the period of total darkness. Hyenas are active at both dusk and dawn. Wild dogs hunt at dawn and dusk. Long-term studies showed that when populations of one of these predators are removed or become overabundant, the others adjust their activity schedules in response. The temporal structure of nocturnal predation is an emergent property of the community, not a fixed characteristic of each species. The system continuously reorganizes itself. The ii of Madagascar is probably the most morphologically singular nocturnal primate that exists. It's the only primate in the world that uses echolocation to locate food. It taps its extraordinarily long middle finger on wood surfaces and listens to the echo with its enormous, mobile ears to detect hollow chambers created by insect larvae beneath the bark. This behavior, called percussive foraging, is functionally equivalent to what woodpeckers do with their beak. But the ii arrived at a completely different solution starting from a completely different ancestor. The combination of percussive echolocation, continuously growing in sizes, and a uniquely anatomical finger in a single animal represents a convergent evolution with completely unrelated groups, a testament to the power of a specific feeding niche shaping life forms over time. The deep ocean black dragonfish possesses photoreceptors that contain chlorophyll, literally the pigment of plant photosynthesis, incorporated into its retinal visual cells to amplify sensitivity to red light. Red light barely penetrates below a few meters in seawater. But the black dragonfish itself produces red bioluminescent light through specialized photophores and uses this light as an invisible flashlight to illuminate prey that can't detect that wavelength. Most deep-sea animals are blind to this light. It's a stealth lighting system the predator uses without alerting its prey. A biological process fundamentally associated with sunlight being repurposed in absolute darkness for a purpose completely different from the one for which it evolved. Owls don't have symmetrical ears, and this asymmetry isn't a defect, but a sophisticated adaptation. The ear openings are positioned at slightly different heights on each side of the head, which causes the same sound to reach each ear with a slightly different vertical phase difference. The owl's brain integrates these differences to calculate the complete three-dimensional position of a sound, not just in which direction, but also at which height. This system is so precise that barn owls can capture mice in total darkness, guided solely by the sound of the prey's movements on snow or dry foliage, with a success rate that rivals their captures under partial lighting conditions. For an owl in absolute darkness, the world exists in sound with the same spatial richness with which it exists in light for a falcon in the sun. The tarsier, a small nocturnal primate from Southeast Asia, has the largest eyes relative to body size of any living vertebrate. Each eye has approximately the same volume as the animal's brain. And tarsiers are the only primates in the world without functional cone cells in the retina. Their vision is entirely based on rods, making them completely incapable of discriminating colors. This distinguishes them radically from all other primates. By completely eliminating cones, tarsiers maximized the density of rods to the point of possessing one of the most light-sensitive retinas ever described in vertebrates. In lighting conditions equivalent to a moonless night, tarsiers detect moving objects that would be invisible to any human optical equipment of comparable size. The price was the colorful world. The gain was the night. The oral bird is a nocturnal cave-dwelling bird from South America that combined such unusual biological characteristics that it was considered unclassifiable by taxonomists for decades. It's one of the very few birds in the world that navigates in completely dark caves using echolocation. Its diet is entirely based on oily palm fruits, making it one of the few vertebrates in the world that feeds exclusively on fruit without ever consuming animal protein. The high caloric content of these fruits accumulates in the chicks in such extraordinary quantities that they can be 50% heavier than the adults before they learn to fly. Indigenous and colonial communities collected these fat chicks to extract oil, which was used as fuel for lighting. A bird of the darkness providing the oil that fed human lights. An irony that time should never forget. The daily vertical migration of oceanic zooplankton represents the largest animal migration on the planet in terms of biomass, occurs entirely in the dark, and has global climate consequences that were only recently recognized. Trillions of microscopic organisms rise to the ocean surface every night to feed on phytoplankton, and return to the depths at dawn. When they defecate and die in the depths, the carbon they consumed is deposited in layers where it can remain sequestered for centuries or millennia. Recent estimates suggest that this nocturnal vertical migration may transport between 1 and 5 gigatons of carbon to the ocean depths annually. These tiny, nocturnal organisms are one of the main regulators of the global carbon cycle and, consequently, of Earth's climate. The night, made of invisible beings, sustaining the balance of the planet. The story of nocturnal animals is, at its core, a story about adaptation. About how life finds ways to thrive where there seems to be nothing. About how the pressure of the environment sculpts, over immense eras, solutions so elegant that the world's best engineers study them and try to replicate them. About how the darkness, which for us represents absence, is for most creatures on the planet simply a different set of conditions, with their own resources, their own challenges, their own beauty. Every time the sun sets, an enormous and silent world begins to move. Eyes that amplify the last sliver of light open slowly. Ears that listen to frequencies beyond human reach sharpen. Nostrils that read the air like a rich and dense text begin to work. Wings that cross the dark without making a single sound unfold. And everywhere, in every forest, in every ocean, in every desert, in every cave, the nocturnal world wakes up and continues the story that never stopped, that never will stop, that began long before any human city ever existed and will continue long after. The night isn't empty. The night was never empty. It was just waiting for you to pay attention. And as you drift into a deep and restorative sleep, remember to subscribe, so these stories can keep finding you, night after night. Sleep well, and sweet dreams.